My husband slapped my mouth in front of his coworkers because of a joke. He did not realize that he just ended his own career. My husband Craig slapped me at his company dinner in March, right in front of his boss and 12 coworkers. I'd made a joke about him leaving his socks everywhere. Everyone laughed. Craig didn't. He turned and hit me across the mouth, quick and sharp, then laughed like it was nothing. Just keeping the wife in line, you know how it is. His boss, Richard, looked uncomfortable but chuckled along. The others went quiet for a second. Then someone changed the subject. Craig squeezed my shoulder hard. Don't embarrass me like that again. I touched my lip. It was bleeding. Craig handed me a napkin. Clean yourself up. You're making a scene. I went to the bathroom. Stared at my face in the mirror. Split lip. Red mark across my cheek. When I came back, Craig was telling another story. Everyone was laughing again, like nothing happened. In the car, Craig was annoyed. You made me look bad. Joking about my habits like I'm some child. I said nothing. He kept going. Richard probably thinks I can't control my own household. This could affect my promotion. Your promotion. You hit me. Craig rolled his eyes. I barely touched you. Stop being so dramatic. You've always been too sensitive. The next morning, my lip was swollen. Craig didn't apologize. Instead, he complained about breakfast being late. I'm meeting Richard for golf. Can't be late because you're moving slowly. That's when I decided Craig was right about one thing. This would definitely affect his promotion. I called Craig's company, asked about their domestic violence policies. Very strict, zero tolerance. Any employee who commits violence faces immediate termination, even outside work, especially if it involves other employees as witnesses. Interesting. I made an appointment for Monday. Wore a turtleneck to hide the bruise on my shoulder. The HR director, Janet, was very professional. You said you needed to discuss a sensitive matter. My husband, Craig, hit me at the company dinner on Friday night, in front of Richard and the entire Northeast sales team. Craig Dalton. Is your husband Craig Dalton? Yes. He slapped me when I made a joke. Richard saw it. Everyone saw it. This is serious. We need to investigate immediately. By Tuesday they'd interviewed everyone at the dinner. Most tried to downplay it. Just a marital spat. Didn't see much. Couples being couples. But two people told the truth. Craig's coworker, Brendan, and his wife. They described the slap, the blood, the way Craig laughed about it. On Wednesday, Craig was suspended pending investigation. He came home furious. You went to my work. Are you insane? You hit me in front of your coworkers. That's insane. It was nothing. A tap. Now I might lose my job. Good. Craig grabbed my wrist. You're going to call Janet right now. Tell her you exaggerated. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. I pulled away. No. He stepped closer. This is my career. Our income. How will we pay the mortgage? Maybe you shouldn't have hit your wife at a company event. Craig punched the wall. Now you've done it. When I fix this, you're going to regret ruining my life. Thursday. Craig tried to fix it himself. Called Richard. Told him I was mentally unstable. On medication. Made things up for attention. Richard didn't buy it. Craig, I saw you hit her. We all did. She provoked me. She's always provoking me. Richard reported this conversation to our. Said Craig showed no remorse. Was actually blaming me. Making threats. About what would happen when he fixed this. Friday, Craig was fired. Came home with a cardboard box. 20 years with that company. 20 years. Gone because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. You mean because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself. Craig threw the box at me. Missed. You've destroyed everything. My reputation is ruined. Word spread quickly. Craig applied to other companies. They'd call for references. Richard would tell them exactly why Craig was terminated. Physical violence against a spouse at a company function. No one would touch him. Craig's brother called me. You need to help Craig. He made a mistake. Tell people it wasn't that bad. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. He hit me in public. His brother got angry. Are you destroying his life over one slap? He destroyed his own life. And it wasn't the first time. Just the first time with witnesses. By month 2, Craig couldn't find work. We were behind on the mortgage. He blamed me every day. If you hadn't gone to our, if you weren't so sensitive, I won't suffer like this. He hit me again, slapping the back of my head over and over again. He would not stop even though I was crying. But someone swung a pan right at his head and he screamed in pain. Standing at his back was his mother, Juliet. She raised the pan higher and told me to get my purse and phone. Her voice shook but stayed firm. I grabbed my bag from the counter, fumbling with the zipper. My phone was on the table. I snatched it. Craig pushed himself up from the floor, blood running down his temple. He touched his head and looked at his hand, seeing red. His eyes went wide, then narrow. He took a step toward us. Juliet moved between us, the pan still up like a weapon. Craig stopped. He pointed at me and started screaming about how I ruined everything. How this was all my fault. How he'd make me pay for destroying his life. Juliet backed toward the door, pulling me with her. Craig followed, yelling louder. We reached the front door and Juliet yanked it open. She pushed me outside first, then came after me, keeping herself between Craig and me the whole time. He stumbled after us onto the porch, his words turning into threats about what he'd do when he caught us. We ran to her car in the driveway. I got in the passenger side, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't get the seatbelt clicked. Juliet started the engine and backed out fast, tires squealing. Craig stood in the yard, pointing and shouting. I watched him through the side mirror as we drove away. He was still yelling, still making threats. My whole body wouldn't stop shaking. I kept thinking about the look in his eyes right before Juliet hit him. He wasn't going to stop. He would have kept hitting me until something really bad happened. His own mother had to use a frying pan to save me from him. At Juliet's house, she led me inside and locked the door behind us. She checked the lock twice. Then she went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Her hands trembled as she got 2 mugs from the cabinet. She kept saying she was sorry, over and over. I sat at her kitchen table and didn't know what to say. The tea kettle whistled and she poured hot water over tea bags. She brought the mugs to the table and sat across from me. She started talking about Craig's father. How he used to hit her too. How she left him when Craig was 12. She said she saw signs in Craig over the years. Little things. His temper. The way he talked about me sometimes. But she told herself he was different. That he learned from watching what his father did. That he would never become like that. She cried while she talked. I told her about the other times Craig hit me. When no one was around to see it. When I couldn't prove it happened. She reached across the table and held my hand. She kept crying and apologizing. I cried too. We sat there drinking tea and crying together for a long time. Juliet said I needed to stay with her. I started to argue but she cut me off. She said Craig would come looking for me at our house. That he'd be even angrier now. She picked up her phone and said she was calling the police. I felt sick. Reporting him to HR was one thing. Calling the police felt bigger. Scarier. What if it made everything worse? Juliet looked at me hard. She said Craig already tried to hurt me badly. That he wasn't going to stop on his own. That next time she might not be there with a pan. She dialed before I could think of another argument. I sat frozen on her couch while she talked to the dispatcher. She gave our address, described what happened, said her son attacked me and she had to stop him with a frying pan. That I had injuries and needed help. I stared at the wall and wondered how my life turned into a police report. How I went from making a joke at a dinner to this. The dispatcher said officers were on their way. Juliet hung up and sat next to me. She put her arm around my shoulders. We waited, together. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. A man and a woman. They asked me what happened and I told them. My voice came out quiet and shaky. They took pictures of my head and neck. The bruises were already forming. Dark purple marks where Craig's hand connected over and over. The female officer asked if Juliet saw what happened. Juliet described walking into her son beating me. How she grabbed the pan and hit him to make him stop. How much blood there was. The officers wrote everything down. Then they asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at Juliet. She nodded. I said yes, barely louder than a whisper. The male officer said they'd go arrest Craig tonight. That he'd be charged with domestic assault. The female officer said I did the right thing, reporting it. That these situations usually get worse if nobody stops them. They gave me paperwork about what happens next. Court dates, procedures, things I didn't really understand yet. The officers explained how to get a restraining order. They said I should file for one first thing in the morning. The male officer mentioned that Craig got fired for workplace violence. That it would help my case show a pattern. I realized that going to HR back in March created a record. Proof that this wasn't the first time. That Craig had a history of hitting me. The officers said that paper trail might save my life. They asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I told them I was staying with Juliet. They said that was good. That I shouldn't go back to the house alone. They gave me a card for domestic violence resources, shelters, counseling, legal help. The female officer said to call any time if Craig tried to contact me. They left to go arrest him. I sat on Juliet's couch holding the card and the paperwork. Everything felt unreal. That night I couldn't sleep. Juliet set me up in her guest room but I just laid there staring at the ceiling. Every sound made me jump. A car outside, the house settling, wind against the windows. I kept getting up to check that the doors were locked. Around 3 in the morning Juliet knocked and asked if I was okay. I said I couldn't sleep. She came in and sat on the edge of the bed. She started telling me about leaving Craig's father, how hard it was, how scared she felt. She said she wasted 15 years believing he would change, waiting for him to become the man she thought she married. But he never did. She said the hardest part was admitting all that time was gone, that she couldn't get those years back. We talked until the sun came up. She shared things she never told anyone. I shared things I never said out loud before. By morning we were both exhausted but something felt different, like we weren't alone anymore. The phone rang around 9. Juliet answered and then handed it to me. It was the police. They said Craig was arrested last night and charged with domestic assault. He was being held at the county jail. There would be a bail hearing in 2 days. They said, because of how bad the attack was and because I told them about previous times he hit me. They were recommending he stay in jail until trial. I felt relief and fear at the same time. Relief that he was locked up. Fear about what would happen when he got out. Because he would get out eventually. The officer said I should definitely file for that restraining order today. I said I would. After I hung up I told Juliet what they said. She made breakfast and we ate without talking much. Both of us were thinking about what came next. Juliet drove me to the courthouse. We found the right office and I filled out forms for a temporary restraining order. The clerk looked at the police report number I gave her. She said they could fast track it because of the active assault charges. We waited for 2 hours. Finally a clerk called my name. A judge reviewed my paperwork right there in her office. She looked at the police report, the photos of my injuries. She asked a few questions about Craig's history. Then she signed the order. Craig was legally banned from contacting me, from coming within 500 feet of me. The judge said if he violated it he'd be arrested immediately. I walked out with the official papers. But I knew a piece of paper wouldn't actually stop Craig if he decided to come after me. It just meant he'd get arrested after he did. The police said I could go back to the house with an escort to get my things. Craig was still in jail, so it was safe. 2 officers met us there. I unlocked the door and went inside. Everything looked exactly the same. Normal. But it felt wrong now. Dirty somehow. I walked through the rooms and saw violence in every corner. The kitchen, where he shoved me against the counter. The living room where he grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. The bedroom where he said things that made me feel small and worthless. I packed fast. Clothes, important papers, my laptop, some photos from before everything got bad. The officers helped carry boxes to Juliet's car. I took one last look at the house before we left. I thought about the life I believed I was building here. The future I imagined. None of it was real. It was all built on fear and control disguised as love. I locked the door and left it all behind. Juliet drove me to the bank the next morning. We sat in the parking lot for a minute before going inside. She told me Craig would definitely try to empty the accounts once he made bail or got out. I needed to protect myself now before he could take everything. We walked in and asked to speak with someone about opening a new account. The banker was nice. She didn't ask questions when I explained I needed an account in only my name. She set everything up in 20 minutes. Then we went to a different bank where Craig and I had our joint savings. I showed my ID and asked to withdraw half of what was in there. The teller checked the balance and printed out a slip. $4,000 and change total. I took $2,000 in cash. My hands shook signing the withdrawal form. This was really happening. I was splitting our money, ending our financial life together. Juliet drove us back to her house and I deposited the cash in my new account using the mobile app. She handed me an envelope with $2,000 bills inside. I can't take this. You already let me stay here. She pushed it back toward me. You need a safety net. Craig left you with nothing. This gives you options. I tried to argue but she wouldn't hear it. Finally I took the money and hugged her. I felt like I could breathe a little easier knowing I had something of my own. The phone rang that afternoon while we were making lunch. Juliet answered and her face went hard. She walked into the other room but I could hear her voice getting louder. When she came back she looked upset. That was Xavier. He wanted to know where you are. What did you tell him? That you're safe and he needs to stay out of it. He said I'm overreacting to a family dispute. Juliet sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. I told him I saw Craig trying to beat you unconscious. That this isn't a dispute. This is assault. He hung up on me. She looked up at me with tired eyes. Not everyone in Craig's family is going to support you. Some of them will take his side no matter what. Xavier thinks I'm betraying my own son. I reached across and squeezed her hand. You saved my life. She nodded but I could see it hurt her. Choosing between her son and doing the right thing was tearing her apart. The phone rang again an hour later. Juliet looked at the caller ID and didn't answer. It rang 4 more times that evening. She turned off the ringer and we ate dinner in silence. 2 days later we drove to the courthouse for Craig's bail hearing. I wore sunglasses even though we were inside because I didn't want anyone to see how scared I looked. The courtroom was small and cold. Craig sat at a table with his lawyer wearing an orange jumpsuit. He didn't look at me when we walked in. The judge came in and everyone stood. Then Craig's lawyer started talking. He said Craig wasn't a flight risk, had no prior criminal record, worked at the same company for 20 years before a recent termination, was a stable member of the community. The prosecutor stood up. She was younger than I expected. She said Craig was terminated from his job for workplace violence against his spouse. That there was a documented pattern of abuse in my statement to police. that he showed no remorse and actually blamed the victim. The judge looked at Craig. "Do you have anything to say?" Craig stood up. "Your Honor, my wife and I had a disagreement that got out of hand. I was under a lot of stress from losing my job." The judge cut him off. "This isn't about stress. This is about assault. Bail is set at $50,000. Craig's face went white. "Your Honor, I can't afford that." The judge closed the file. "Then you'll remain in custody until trial." Next case. Guards led Craig away. He finally looked at me then. Pure hate in his eyes. I looked right back without flinching. Juliet took me to meet with a divorce lawyer the next day. The office was in a small building near her church. The lawyer's name was on a brass plate by the door. Inside, the waiting room had comfortable chairs and magazines. A woman came out and introduced herself as the attorney Juliet had found. She shook my hand and led us back to her office. I explained everything. The assault at the company dinner. Craig getting fired. The months of blame and anger. The attack at home. She took notes and asked questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "I can take your case. Given the circumstances, I'll reduce my usual rate." She explained that Craig's unemployment would work in my favor. His violence would too. The court wouldn't look kindly on an abusive spouse who couldn't support himself. She pulled out papers and started filling them in. I signed my name at the bottom. My hand shook, but I got through it. She made copies and put them in a folder with my name on it. "I'll file these tomorrow. You should receive a court date within a few weeks." I thanked her and we left. In the car, Juliet asked how I felt. I told her I felt like I was finally doing something instead of just surviving. The domestic violence shelter counselor met with me 3 days later. Juliet had set up the appointment. The counselor's office had soft lighting and tissues on every table. She asked me to tell her about my marriage. I started with the company dinner, but she stopped me. "Go back further. When did you first notice something was wrong?" I thought about it. Craig had always been controlling about money, about who I spent time with. He said it was because he cared. The counselor nodded. "That's financial abuse and isolation. Common tactics to maintain control." She explained that Craig's anger about losing his job wasn't really about the job. It was about losing control over me. Without his income, he couldn't keep me dependent. That's why the violence got worse. I sat there processing this. She kept talking. The slap at the dinner wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time anyone else saw it. I realized she was right. I'd been making excuses for years, telling myself it wasn't that bad, that he was just stressed. I was too sensitive. She handed me a tissue. "You're starting to see the patterns now. That's the first step to breaking free." Brendan called Juliet's house a week later. She handed me the phone. "It's Craig's coworker, the one who testified." I took it carefully. "Hello." His voice was kind. "I wanted to check if you're okay. I heard about Craig's arrest. Several people from the company have been worried." I felt tears start. "I'm safe now. Thank you for telling the truth at the investigation." He was quiet for a second. "A lot of people tried to pretend they didn't see anything. I couldn't do that. My wife and I both saw what he did to you." I thanked him again and we hung up. Juliet asked who it was. I explained and she smiled. "See, not everyone sided with Craig. Some people actually care about what's right." That night I thought about Brendan's call, about how he could have stayed quiet like everyone else, but he didn't. He spoke up even though it probably made things awkward at work. That mattered more than he knew. The phone rang one morning while Juliet was at the store. I answered without thinking. There was a recording. "This is a call from an inmate at county jail." I almost hung up but then I heard Craig's voice. "Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you." My finger hovered over the end button. "I'm so sorry." The stress made me snap. "I never meant to hurt you." His voice sounded broken. "If you drop the charges I'll get help." I promise. Real help this time. Therapy, anger management, whatever you want. I felt rage building in my chest. He was doing it again. Making promises he wouldn't keep. Trying to manipulate me into saving him. I hung up without saying a word. Then I called the jail and asked how to block their number. They walked me through it. When Juliet got home I told her what happened. She put the groceries away and hugged me. You did the right thing. He'll keep trying to get to you. You have to stay strong. My hands were still shaking hours later. Mail came to Juliet's house the next week. 2 thick envelopes with the mortgage company's return address. One addressed to me at the old house. One addressed to me here. I opened them both. Foreclosure notices. We were 4 months behind. There was no way to catch up. I showed them to Juliet and she called my lawyer. The lawyer said to let the house go. It was in both our names, so Craig's debt wasn't my responsibility once we divorced. The bank would take the house and that would be the end of it. I felt weird about it. That house was supposed to be our future, our home, but it never really was. It was just a place where I was afraid. Letting it go felt like shedding dead weight. The lawyer said she'd handle the paperwork. I didn't need to do anything else. I threw the notices in the recycling and didn't think about them again. I started applying for jobs the following week, sat at Juliet's kitchen table with my laptop and updated my resume. There was a huge gap where I should have been working. Craig always said his income was enough, that on being available for him. Now I saw it for what it was. Another way to control me. I applied to 20 places in 3 days. Accounting firms, offices, anywhere that might hire someone with my old skills and a big gap in employment. Most didn't respond. A few sent rejection emails. Then one small firm called me in for an interview. The manager asked about the gap. I could have lied, but I was tired of hiding. I left an abusive situation. I'm rebuilding my life now. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she offered me an entry-level position starting in 2 weeks. I almost cried in her office. I took the job immediately. When I told Juliet, she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. You're doing it. You're really getting out. Juliet found a support group that met at her church for families affected by domestic violence. She asked if I wanted to go with her. I wasn't sure at first but agreed. We drove there on a Tuesday night. The meeting was in a small room with chairs in a circle. About 10 people showed up. A facilitator welcomed everyone and asked if anyone wanted to share. One woman raised her hand. She talked about her son, how he'd been abusing his partner for years, how she didn't want to see it, made excuses, told herself it wasn't her business. Then one day the partner ended up in the hospital. That's when she finally faced what her son was. She cried through the whole story. Said the guilt of not intervening sooner would stay with her forever. Other people shared too. Parents who'd enabled abusive children. Siblings who'd looked the other way. Partners who'd escaped and were trying to heal. I didn't share, but I listened. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone. After the meeting ended, Juliet and I sat in the car for a while. She wiped her eyes. I needed to hear that I'm not the only mother dealing with this. I squeezed her hand. We drove home in silence, but it felt different. Like we weren't carrying it all by ourselves anymore. My lawyer called 3 days later. Craig's bail had been posted. Xavier used his house as collateral. I felt my stomach drop. She'd already filed for an emergency hearing about the restraining order. The prosecutor was furious that Craig's family helped him make bail after everything he'd done. Craig would be released that afternoon with an ankle monitor. He had strict orders not to violate the restraining order. 500 feet minimum distance at all times. I hung up and told Juliet. She went pale but nodded. We double-checked all the locks on her doors and windows, made sure the security system was armed. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. At 2 in the morning, Juliet's security system started beeping. Motion detected in the driveway. We both ran to the window. Nothing there, but the alert showed a car had pulled in, then backed out. Juliet called the police, while I watched the street through a crack in the curtains. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. They searched the area and found Craig sitting in his car, exactly 1 block away, technically not violating the 500-foot restriction, but clearly watching the house. The officers talked to him for several minutes, came back and told us he claimed he was just parked there thinking. They warned him that any closer approach would mean immediate arrest. He drove away, slowly. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next afternoon I went to the grocery store with Juliet. We were in the cereal aisle when I saw someone tall with dark hair wearing a jacket like Craig's. My chest got tight. I couldn't breathe. The person turned around and it wasn't him at all. Just some stranger who looked nothing like Craig from the front. But I was already hyperventilating. Juliet grabbed my arm and walked me outside. She made me sit on a bench and breathe slowly. Count to 4 breathing in. Count to 4 breathing out. It took 20 minutes before my hands stopped shaking. Juliet drove us home and made me tea. She said I needed to see the therapist the shelter had recommended. I'd been putting it off, telling myself I was fine. But I clearly wasn't fine. I called and made an appointment for the following week, finally accepting that I needed real help to deal with everything. The therapist's office was small and quiet. She had me fill out paperwork about my safety situation first. Then we talked about what happened. She explained that my panic attack at the store was a normal trauma response. My brain was trying to protect me by staying alert for danger. That's why I saw Craig everywhere even when he wasn't there. She called it hypervigilance, said it was my body's way of trying to keep me safe. We worked on grounding techniques. 5 things I could see. 4 things I could touch. 3 things I could hear. 2 things I could smell. 1 thing I could taste. It helped pull me back to the present when I started panicking. She also taught me breathing exercises and gave me homework about identifying my triggers. We made a safety plan for different scenarios. What to do if I saw Craig. What to do if he tried to contact me. What to do if I had another panic attack. Having a plan made me feel slightly more in control. My lawyer called again a few days later. Richard had sent a message through her. He wanted to write a statement supporting my divorce case. Said the company had dealt with several situations since Craig's termination, where his behavior was worse than people initially reported. Other employees had come forward with stories about Craig's anger issues and inappropriate comments about me. Richard was willing to document all of it. I told my lawyer yes immediately. Having Craig's former boss on record about his behavior felt important. Richard sent over a 3-page statement detailing specific incidents and conversations, including the time Craig had joked about keeping me in line at a previous company event, and the time he'd made comments about how wives needed to know their place. Things I hadn't known other people had witnessed and remembered. Then Craig's lawyer reached out about the divorce settlement, sent over a proposal that offered me almost nothing. The house was in foreclosure, so that was gone. Craig wanted to keep the car that was paid off. Wanted me to take half the credit card debt. His lawyer actually wrote that I had destroyed Craig's career and earning potential, so I should share the financial consequences. My lawyer laughed when she read it to me over the phone. She sent back our counteroffer. I got the car, half of whatever savings still existed. 0 responsibility for any debts Craig had hidden from me or created after his termination. We attached documentation of his abuse, copies of the restraining order, the pending criminal charges, the police reports. My lawyer said no judge would side with an abusive unemployed defendant who was facing jail time. Craig's lawyer went quiet after that. I started my new job on a Monday morning. The office was small but bright. My boss showed me to my desk and introduced me to the other accountants. Everyone was friendly without being nosy. I spent the first week learning their software system and figuring out their filing processes. It felt good to use my brain for something other than fear and survival. My boss knew about my situation. She told me to just let her know if I needed time for therapy appointments or court dates. No questions asked. Having my own income again felt strange at first. Craig had always controlled our money. Told me his salary was enough. That now I saw it for what it was. Another way to keep me dependent and trapped. This paycheck was mine. I could spend it however I wanted. Save it. Use it to build my own life. It felt like getting back a piece of myself that Craig had stolen. The prosecutor called to schedule a meeting. The criminal trial was set for 6 weeks out. She wanted to prepare my testimony. We met at her office downtown. She had me walk through everything that happened the night Craig attacked me, asked detailed questions about previous incidents, showed me photos the police had taken of my injuries. She seemed confident about the case. Juliet's witness statement was powerful. The photos were clear evidence. Craig's termination record established a pattern of violence. But I was terrified of seeing Craig in court, of having to face him while talking about what he'd done. The prosecutor said that was normal. Said I was stronger than I thought. That my testimony would help make sure Craig faced real consequences. I wanted to believe her. I practiced my statement over and over at home, trying to prepare myself for the moment I'd have to look at Craig and tell a courtroom full of strangers what he'd done to me. Juliet started getting mail from Craig's extended family. His aunt sent a long letter calling her a traitor for testifying against her own son. Said family should stick together no matter what. That she was destroying Craig's life over a private matter between husband and wife. His cousin called her phone and left an angry message about how she'd ruined Craig's reputation. How could she side with me over her own blood? Juliet was hurt but she didn't back down. She told me she was choosing to protect an innocent person over enabling an abuser. That real family doesn't cover up violence. She said if his relatives wanted to blame someone they should blame Craig for his choices. I was amazed by her strength. She'd lost relationships with people she'd known her whole life. But she never wavered in supporting me and standing up to Craig. Then Craig violated the restraining order. Emails started showing up at my new work address. I don't know how he got it. The first one was an apology, saying he missed me and wanted to fix things. The second one came an hour later, angrier, blaming me for everything, saying I'd destroyed his life on purpose. The third one was a threat, that I'd regret what I'd done to him, that he'd make sure I paid for ruining him. I forwarded all three to my lawyer immediately. She filed a motion that same day. The police arrested Craig that evening for violating the restraining order. He'd sent 5 more emails by then, each one getting worse. The judge held a hearing the next morning, looked at the emails and the pattern of harassment, revoked Craig's bail entirely, said he'd proven he couldn't follow court orders and posed a danger to me. Craig was sent back to jail until the trial. This time Xavier didn't post bail. Maybe he finally saw who his brother really was. With Craig back in jail, I slept through the night for the first time in months. No jumping at sounds. No checking locks 3 times before bed. No lying awake waiting for him to come home angry. I woke up at 7 without an alarm and felt rested. Juliet noticed at breakfast the next morning. "You look better." I smiled. "I feel better." She squeezed my hand across the table. "You're eating more too." I hadn't realized but she was right. Food tasted good again instead of sitting like rocks in my stomach. The constant fear that had defined every moment was lifting. I could breathe without that tight feeling in my chest. Could think about tomorrow without dread. Craig couldn't get to me now. Couldn't send emails or show up outside my work. The judge had made sure of that. I started Sleeping with my bedroom door open at Juliet's house. Started leaving my phone in the kitchen overnight instead of clutching it like a lifeline. The cautious hope growing inside me felt fragile but real. Maybe I actually was safe now. Geneva reached out through Juliet 2 weeks later. She wanted to meet for coffee if I was comfortable with that. I remembered her from the company dinner. She'd been sitting 3 seats down when Craig hit me. Had testified with her husband about what they saw. I met her at a cafe near my new job on a Saturday morning. She was waiting at a corner table with 2 coffees already ordered. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got you a vanilla latte. That's perfect. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke. I wanted to tell you something about why I testified. I listened. My first husband hit me 2 years ago before I met Brendan. It went on for 3 years before I finally left. Geneva stirred her coffee without drinking it. No, one saw it happen back then. He was careful, only hit me where clothes would cover the bruises. So when I saw Craig hit you, in front of everyone, I knew I had to speak up. Had to be the witness I never had. Her eyes were wet. Watching you report him gave me closure about my own past. Made me feel like maybe all that pain meant something if it helped me recognize what you were going through. I reached across the table and held her hand. Thank you for telling the truth. She smiled. We became friends after that. Met for coffee every week. She introduced me to other women from a support group she attended. Women who'd survived situations like mine. Who understood the specific kind of fear that comes from being heard by someone who's supposed to love you. They welcomed me without questions or judgment. Just offered support, and shared their own stories of leaving and rebuilding. For the first time since Craig hit me at that dinner, I didn't feel alone. My attorney called 3 weeks before the trial. We got Craig's financial disclosure for the divorce. She sounded tense. How bad is it? Worse than we expected. He's $30,000 in debt from credit cards you didn't know about. My stomach dropped. $30,000. He opened accounts in his name only over the past 2 years. Probably knew he was going to lose his job eventually with his behavior. Was preparing to stick you with the debt. But you won't be responsible. The cards are in his name. He hid them from you. That's fraud. I felt sick thinking about it. 2 years of secret debt while he controlled every dollar I spent. Complained when I bought groceries he didn't like. Made me account for every purchase. Meanwhile, he was racking up thousands on cards I didn't know existed. My attorney kept talking. The divorce will finalize your separation from his financial disaster. He can't touch your income or savings. Can't claim you owe half his hidden debt. I asked what he spent the money on.